In August of 1492, Christopher Columbus set sail from Spain with 3 ships and a bold conviction. If he headed west across the uncharted ocean, he would reach the wealthy markets of Asia. At the time, the overland routes to Asia were controlled by Ottoman powers, making spices and silks wildly expensive for Europeans. Columbus convinced King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella to back his voyage by arguing that the Earth was smaller than most scholars believed, and that a western passage would be both quicker and more profitable than the long, perilous journeys around Africa. On September 6th, after final preparations at the port of Palos de la Frontera, the Nina, the Pinta, and the flagship Santa slipped quietly into the Atlantic. Columbus commanded around 90 experienced mariners, a few who doubted the mission's success, and many who feared the open sea. He steered by dead reckoning and the stars, trusting natural signs. Flocks of seabirds returning to land at dusk, floating seaweed, and drifts of unfamiliar driftwood. Still, anxiety mounted among the crew as days stretched into weeks with nothing but endless blue water on the horizon. Rumors of mutiny trailed the expedition. Sailors whispered that the ocean was bottomless, inhabited by sea monsters or leading to a fiery abyss. Columbus, however, held firm. On October 7th, he recorded in his journal that fears were high, but he reassured his men that land was near. 2 days later, a sailor on the Pinta spotted a flash of white on the horizon, glint of sunlight on sand. On the morning of October 12, 1492, Columbus sighted land just as the crew's nerves had frayed. They made landfall on an island in the Bahamas, naming it San Salvador. To Columbus, this was the eastern fringe of Asia, perhaps the fabled islands of Japan or China, described by Marco Polo. The native people they encountered, he called Indios, wore no metal armor, carried no iron weapons, and greeted the newcomers with a mixture of curiosity and hospitality. Columbus believed he had reached islands off the Asian mainland, not an entirely unknown world. Over the next month, Columbus and his captains explored nearby islands Cuba, which he assumed was mainland China, and Hispaniola, which he thought to be the golden Chapanyu of Marco Polo's tales. He noted fertile soil, lush forests, and abundant gold dust in riverbeds. Throughout his letters home, he described potential plantations and easy conversions to Christianity, believing that these discoveries would secure his fame, wealth, and spiritual reward. Never did he suspect he'd stumbled upon new continents. When Columbus returned to Spain in March 1493, he was hailed as a hero by Ferdinand and Isabella. Letters and sensational reports circulated throughout Europe, proclaiming the opening of a western route to Asia and the promise of unimaginable wealth. Maps were redrawn. Voyagers and merchants clamored for a share of the spoils. Yet even as new expeditions departed Spain, some scholars began to question Columbus's assumptions. The distances he reported and the geography he sketched did not match any known Asian coastlines. In 1497 and 1498, other explorers struck further south, mapping coastlines that clearly did not belong to Asia. Amerigo Vespucci, a Florentine navigator, wrote letters describing vast lands extending far beyond the Caribbean, suggesting these were part of a new world. In his honor, mapmakers christened the continents America. Meanwhile, Columbus remained convinced to his dying day that his discoveries were islands off Asia's coast. His obsession with proving a western route to the Indies colored his interpretation of every new shoreline. Columbus's mistake had far-reaching consequences. His voyages triggered waves of European exploration, colonization, and conquest, reshaping global trade, ecosystems, and cultures. Gold and silver flooded into Europe from the Americas, while crops like maize, potatoes, and tomatoes revolutionized diets worldwide. Tragically, the indigenous peoples of the Americas suffered disease, displacement, and oppression at the hands of colonizers. The accidental discovery became the catalyst for profound and often brutal transformations. Today, we remember Christopher Columbus as both a visionary mariner and a tragic figure, blinded by his own assumptions. He never realized he had encountered two entirely new continents, believing instead that he had finally unlocked the ancient riches of Asia. His voyages remind us how bold ambition and navigational skill can rewrite history and how a single misconception can lead to discoveries that change the world forever.